If you're a comic book fan when it comes to video games, you take the good with the bad. For every Marvel snap, there's a DC Dual Force. Every Ultimate Alliance, Deadpool, Injustice, Green Lantern. And for every Avengers, there's a Suicide Squad.
Hey, Suicide Squad! Fuck you!
This is Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, a co-op live service looter shooter game from Rocksteady Studios, which I'll admit is a weird one, and a game that has a title that is far too long. I'm only going to use that title 3 more times during this. For the rest of it, it's going to just be called Suicide Squad because it's way shorter. So let's get into it. The game is set in the same DC Comics universe as their previous Arkham titles, and it drops you and up to 3 of your friends into a Metropolis currently under attack. The world's finest are gone, mind-controlled by Brainiac and now standing against us. Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. Well, that's one. Sees you playing as a group of misfit convicts, trying to do the seemingly impossible. Stop Brainiac? Save the world? But first, there's a little problem with that. We've got to deal with the fastest man alive, the world's greatest detective.
Yeah, go Superman! Oh fuck, it's Superman!
The Man of Steel, and Green Lantern. Sorry, John, at least you're not Guy. Getting this out of the way up front, I like Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. That's 2. There's a lot going on here that should be discussed though, some of which are rather large negatives, but we'll get into it. I just want to say this isn't a bad game. It's a larger indictment of games as a service as a whole, really, but let's break it down, we'll get there. The game sees you playing as either Harley Quinn, Digger Harkness, aka Captain Boomerang, Lloyd Lawton, otherwise known as Deadshot, and King Shark, or Nanoway. You're recruited against your will by Amanda Waller, head of the shadowy government organization Argus, and you're going to be part of Task Force X, which more informally is known as the Suicide Squad. Normally, the Suicide Squad is named that because someone always dies, but it's kind of weird to call it that. We'll circle back to that one really later on, if I remember. The premise is simple. Brainiac has invaded, laid waste to Metropolis, and used mind control to turn some of Earth's finest heroes against us. Task Force X's job is a simple one in theory. Take out the Justice League, stop Brainiac, save the world. It's just that easy, you know? And that's the story. It's a completely acceptable story. It's a premise that could grace the pages of a DC comic. There's no issues with it. The main campaign plays out over roughly 12 hours depending on difficulty and how many of the side missions you do. There's some pacing issues with it regarding how the bosses are spread out through those hours, and the way the story wraps up feels like a comic writer realizing they've got a couple of fights left and only 4 pages to wrap the story up, but it's a great campaign. It's fine. It's good. It's unsurprising given Rocksteady's track record with previous Arkham games that it is good. The cross-character banter does a lot of heavy lifting during cutscenes and missions to endear you to those characters. Yeah, they start out as potentially unlikable reprobates like Captain Boomerang, but by the end of the campaign, they really do stand out as consistently enjoyable and comedic, especially Captain Boomerang. He really is like top of that list for me. Not all characters are. Some characters definitely are stronger than others when it comes to writing. Batman, to me, was the biggest odd duck. And I know you're going to yell at me about Batman, but let me explain. Like, it's not because I dislike evil Batman. I'm fine with that. And I'm totally okay with Kevin Conroy delivering a hamming it up, scenery chewing villain Batman. Perfect. Love it. But Batman never felt like a great detective. Like, there's problems with the way that he was portrayed to me in regards to how you interact with him. Let me explain. An early section of the game sees you walking through a Batman experience that recaps the previous Arkham games while covering Batman's history. It's great. Like, during this, though, Batman picks you off one by one for story reasons, and there's this feeling of panic and, oh, Batman. When you finally encounter him later in the story, though, he relies on fear toxin for his sections, which just feels odd to me. Sure, it runs with the theme of Arkham, but like, there's no feeling of being against a smarter opponent, a man who has plans upon plans, fighting against someone who seems larger than life, an entity that some don't believe is real, just kind of being stalked from the shadows and picked off. Those aspects, to me, those are things that make Batman Batman. And they're just missing. I get it. When you're dealing with characters that have existed since the 40s, people have grown up with them and they have an image in their head of what their Batman looks like. Mine sounds like Kevin Conroy. Like, I grew up with that voice. That's how I hear it in my head. People are going to be overly protective of what their Batman sounds like, looks like, and how he acts. How aggressive, how smart, how detective, how actiony. Fine. It's evident from the way that people feel about Kevin's last performance as the Caped Crusader that that's exactly true. It also means that there's a large amount of history to pull from, and Rocksteady have taken real care in areas of the game to fill it with little Easter eggs or nods to previous stories or other characters, and that's what makes the way some of the characters are handled just a stronger point of criticism for me. The campaign structure itself, though, mainly relies on using generalized missions, with story beats surrounding them, and that's to say that the missions you're running during the campaign, they're your endgame. You protect escorts, you destroy rooftop encampments, you throw people onto a bus. It isn't exactly new ground for a live service game to be doing this. Division and Destiny both have you run the content you leveled through at endgame. The same can be said for the types of missions you're encountering. They're the same kind of missions you will have seen elsewhere, but that's not a negative. End of the day, all quests in online games boil down into 6 groups: kill, defend, collect, fetch, escort, and interact. Suicide Squad is no different here, and it would be wrong of me to jump on just it when other things are doing exactly the same. The only complaint I do have is that escort missions, to me, are that warm bag of salad you get with a takeaway. You didn't really ask for it, and you'd rather it wasn't there. But what about what keeps you entertained during that time? What about what makes it enjoyable through that grind? Well, 2 main aspects to me are what jump out. It's how combat feels and how traversal is, that core loop. Missions are scattered around the map, so traversal has to be fun, getting between those points. City of Heroes nailed that. The traversal skills in City of Heroes, perfect. Avengers partially nailed it, but failed on some of the characters. Hulk, Iron Man, they were a delight, but Captain America, you would turn up eventually when everyone else was done. Suicide Squad, though, doesn't suffer from that issue. All 4 main characters have unique traversal skills that feel fitting, that make sense in the comic world, and they feel satisfying to use. Harley swings around the city with a grapple gun and a bat drone that she's claimed. Deadshot has a jetpack, because they're cool. King Shark throws himself through the air and swims. And Boomerang kind of uses his boomerangs, although technically it's the Speed Force, so asterisk. But what about combat? Well, here's where it falls apart. Combat is frustrating. Sure, it feels good. The guns are enjoyable enough to use, but that's where the problem lies. It's a missed opportunity. Each character uses a signature weapon or style when it comes to their melee interactions, like Harley's hammers or Boomer's rangadangs. Their unique attacks for their suicide strikes and traversal are unique as well. That's great, but their core damage, what you're going to be doing most of the time, is from guns. There's nothing wrong with the gunplay. The guns feel fine, and each character uses a different selection of guns, but each character's identity could have really been expanded upon more in the arsenal they have available. And that's kind of the theme that runs through a decent portion of the game, unfortunately. Yeah, it's good enough, but people are holding it up in comparison to the level of great that other Rocksteady games have achieved, and so that's where the problem lies. So, you now know what you'll be doing and how you'll be doing it, but what about the rewards? Suicide Squad is, of course, a looter-shooter. We've discussed the shooter. What about the looter? Let's go over that a bit quick, because there's something else I want to discuss. You have sets, you have gear. It's unique to certain heroes and themed. There's afflictions that you can get on your weapons. It's the standard affair. There's nothing flashy bells and whistles here. Not yet. But let's move on and discuss the live service approach. The main game boils down to 12 hours of tutorial, and then you get into the end game. And that's where you're going to be spending most of your time. That end game after launch experience is what you're going to be spending more time in than anything else. And there's a lot of discourse that you can find online regarding the feelings of the game being live service, how many people wanted it to be a single player game, or how it wasn't true to what they wanted from Rocksteady. There's negative opinions about whether or not they want the game to survive, and honestly, I don't agree. I want Suicide Squad to succeed, not only because I'm a comic book fan, but because I like the idea of supporting developers making smart choices when it comes to something. Suicide Squad is going to get compared to Avengers a lot, and Avengers failed, yes. Avengers lasted 2 years. During that time, the biggest issue, in my opinion, was a stale update cycle and a lack of content. That is killer when it comes to a live service game. You need to make sure you have an enjoyable core loop, that traverse combat loop, rinse, repeat. Outside of that, you need to have a constant drip of content. You need to let people know what's coming and communicate roadmaps to them. On this front, personally, I think Rocksteady is approaching this with a great idea. We've already got a roadmap. It outlines the first 3 seasons. We're getting Joker from Elseworlds in Season 1. New environments, enemy variants, boss fights, themed weapons and sets, and some new episode stuff, new Riddler things. There's new activities, and that's just first season alone. And there's going to be mid-season updates, and we know that 1, 2, and 3 are coming. And there'll be more after that. Alongside the season, we're also getting a battle pass, which I'm not really a fan of battle passes. This one is filled with cosmetics only and primary currency so that you can buy stuff from the store, which, sure, great. But the thing that I'm okay with more than anything else in this is that if you buy a battle pass, it won't expire. That means there's no issue of you having to rush to finish it or feeling like you wasted money because you didn't get round to doing it. There is no worry about FOMO. You can just think, hey, I like the costumes in that, I'm going to pick it up. It's not competing for your time. The style and theme that they're using for this as well fits an endgame situation. They're using the multiverse and pulling from Elseworlds and other places to get characters in or change them around a little bit and just play with it. And DC loves their multiverse. It's a big thing in the comics if you haven't read them, and they're leaning into it. Elseworlds Joker is coming in Season 1. There's shadow pictures for Season 2 that mean it could be Mr. Freeze, or it might be a female variant of it, which, that sounds great. It's another interesting character coming. So, yeah. We've seen heroes die, we've seen them be twisted around in stories, like we've got Injustice, Darkseid Ward, Deceased. It's not new or offensive to be making heroes die and turning them evil and for villains to rise up and save the day. It's not new. I've done that before. And it's reasons like this that cause me to want Suicide Squad to succeed. There are some elements that need attention, yes. While you can turn off a good amount of the bombastic clutter that the UI throws at you, some of it you can't turn down, and that really could use refinement, but that's an easy fix. Enemy variation as well is lacking, I will admit that. The enemy variation and mission options that are available are bare bones, but Season 1 is in March. I'm not using that as an excuse, but we'll see how it goes. That's like how this is going to play out. I understand that upsets some people. There's a risk that each season is not going to add enough content to make enough of an impact. Yes, I get it. But at this point in time, Suicide Squad feels like another playground that you can just spend time in with some friends. It's not an MMO though. I don't see myself logging on daily to do quests and tasks and my daily knockouts. But I do see myself hopping on with friends when a new patch drops, or to knock out a few levels of a battle pass. It's not Game of the Year. It's not. But it's also not a dead duck, as much as people really want to hammer home that this game is already over. Suicide Squad kills the Justice League, last one. Gives you an arena to play around with friends in. That just, it's valid as any other service game. It offers the same style of quests and loot. It gives you the same kind of experience. It's just the theme and set dressing are different, and some people really want that. As a comic book fan, I love the idea of hanging out in this world. Okay, I could spend hours talking about the appeal or disdain for live service games that some people have, but this isn't the place. It's not the time either, to be honest. I think the model and idea of live service games does need to evolve. It does need to change and adapt somehow. Battle passes are boring. Even if this one is going to make it so that they don't expire. They need to try something new eventually in this area, but let's move on. Where Rocksteady goes with Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. Alright, that was 4. From here is hopefully they take it to a supported and sustained live service game. But the online hotness at the moment is already decrying this game, and Warner Brothers' track record for cutting out the legs from under projects does mean that Rocksteady has a deck stacked against them. I hope it works out, but honestly, only time will tell. We'll have to see how this one goes. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.